So we've been tasked with, I think they said in the 38 years, if you read the material, that the program's been in existence, there really hasn't been a review of it. And, you know, every program, no matter how well it's run or anything else, can use a review. And a lot has changed in 38 years. Alice, when your boss came in and worked on Sunday afternoon, he was probably doing it with pencil and paper. And a lot of us did have to review our trust accounts that way, or maybe with, you know, duplicate carbon copies of things stuff. So a lot has changed, and we're really going to just look at the program and see, you know, what should remain the same and maybe if changes should be made. So we thought, I see Marcy's here, Matt's here. Do either one of you have anything to say before we get started?
No, just thank you. Although this is a good example of when we have a member of the bar complain, we are responding, because actually we're doing this because we had one particular lawyer that emailed me from Harnett County, small town, I think solo practitioner, with the concern. Eddie, you know who I'm talking about. And so this shows how when that happens, we respond. So I think that's a good thing. And I think it is great that we're looking at it. And I appreciate all of you, all of your time. And Barbara, appreciate you coming and leading this group. You're perfect for this job. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
And I would just like to ask, just because you're an officer does not mean you survive the wrath of a random audit, because I was elected in October and Ann came to see me in December. And so it's not just the underlings, but the officers get popped too.
Good. All right. Thank you all. So, I think always when we're going to start and look at a program, it's best to start at the beginning with an understanding of how it currently operates and kind of go from there. So that's what we thought we'd do is start with sort of an overview. And I'm not sure who's going to present that. You're muted.
Yeah, Barbara. I'm going to just start and introduce this. Ann is going to do most of the presentation on the items that were listed under item 2 on the agenda. And then Leonore will talk about the random audit correction process, which was item 3 of the agenda. But just to start out, the goals of the program are actually set forth in the trust account handbook. They are to reduce the incidence of misappropriation and mishandling of client funds by monitoring compliance with procedures and record keeping requirements. These are procedural audits. It's always important to remember that they're procedural audits. And that one of the other goals of the program was to educate lawyers on what the requirements are, to make sure that they're staying current with the current requirements. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off to Ann and let her tell you what happens during a procedural audit.
Okay. So I review the all trust accounts maintained by a lawyer or by a firm. So that includes general trust accounts, which real estate, if they have a real estate trust account, that falls under the general, and then any fiduciary or dedicated trust accounts. The period review during the audit is the most recent 12 months, and that period can go between 1 year and the next. So it starts with the most recent reconciliation that they've completed and then goes back the 12 months. While reviewing the records, I essentially have my audit report checklist. So I look for areas of compliance and then areas of deficiencies if there are some. So I look at more of their record keeping practices to make sure that they have the proper procedures in line to comply with the rules. When I complete the review of the records, I prepare the audit report on site and I share that with the lawyers. It can be solo practitioner lawyer, and if it's a firm, it can be multiple lawyers. Their staff as well sometimes attends the review, which I think is a plus. I think anyone that has trust account responsibility should be part of the audit and get that feedback. I review in detail the audit report with the lawyers or anyone present. If they have deficiencies, I then review those with them, and that's actually later down in my statistics, but I do prepare a corrections request form, and I review that in detail with them as well.
You want to tell us, I think, next on here, does anybody have any questions about what Ann has said so far? I think as mentioned, if you're on the State Bar Council, you get audited. So most of everybody here has been through it at some point. All right, you want to talk to us about how lawyers are selected for the audit?
Yes. So initially, every quarter, 2 judicial districts are randomly selected from a list of 6 districts. And those districts are selected by the number of times they've been audited and how frequently the last time they've been audited. So it narrows it down to the district that has not been audited most recently and not been audited as many times.
So how are the 6 determined?
That's randomly generated.
Yes, it's a random, random report that is produced from the membership database.
We just
It randomly selects those.
Yeah, it creates a random district, a random selection that is sent to Ann, and she looks at the list and the last time those have been audited. But it's run. Ann doesn't select the 6 in any way. It's given to her. Yeah.
Correct.
But, and I think I read this, you can't have it just pluck 2 out because it could then be getting the same 2 over.
Correct.
So.
Correct.
So it gets 6 and then you look at them and make a determination. And I did look at the material and looked like we're pretty even on all the districts, you know, 7 to 8 times each.
Yes.
Maybe 9 for some. Okay.
Yes. And then I also when I look at those judicial district selections, there are times when a district has been audited within the last 3 years. So I exclude those districts, and sometimes, rarely, I have to have Peter rerun that report so that those districts that are within that 3-year period aren't selected, because as you know, we don't audit lawyers more than once every 3 years. So once the districts are identified, a list is generated, a randomized list is generated again from the membership database by Peter or Dottie, and they send that report to me, and then I start scheduling in consecutive order from the first lawyer on down, depending on how many audits I'm doing in their districts. So the districts are reapportioned by size to determine how many audits I'll be doing in each district.
Okay, I believe that I read that you try to do a total of 60 audits.
I do a total of up to 60. Most often it's an average of 50, taking into consideration holidays, vacation, things like that. So it's mostly around 50 that I do, but I do no more than 60.
So for those that did not have a chance maybe to go through the material, explain you have 2 districts, and let's just pretend it's 50 or 60, whatever, how you decide how many lawyers you're doing in each of those.
Okay, so there's a formula that I do. We'll just base it on the 60. So if I take the size of the district, the number of active members in the district, and I divide that. I'm going to be on the spot now because I have a cheat sheet that I don't have in front of me. But I divide the number of attorneys in the district by the number of audits and reapportion them to the size of the district. So your larger districts, remember, keep in mind it's 2 districts. Your larger of the 2 districts is going to have more audits completed or conducted than a smaller one would.
Okay, all right. And I assume when you're picking, when you're looking at the number of lawyers, is it just lawyers that have trust accounts?
No, all active members are on the list, and I do not have the IOLTA information, which is proprietary. They're the ones that only have the information on which lawyers and firms have trust accounts. So when I start at the top of the list, I call every lawyer and I ask, do you have a trust account? If they do, I schedule the audit. If they don't, then I just move on to the next lawyer in line. So I don't know until I start scheduling and contacting lawyers whether or not they have a trust account.
What else would exclude them from the audit if someone else in their firm had been audited?
Yes, yes. If someone else in their firm has been audited, if they, I'm trying to think, well, of course, if they don't have a trust account, so your district attorneys, your public defenders, those names are included in the list, but they would be excluded because they don't have trust accounts.
It also could be if they moved into that district from a different district and had been audited, a year prior.
Right.
They could be excluded as well because they
With
still
that, yeah, they're within that 3-year period, right? Right.
It's a lot to take in. Does anybody have any questions about that? I think this is one of the areas that lawyers in general have questions about because what they think, and I don't know how we would prove or disprove it, but that is if they are in a smaller district, that they have a much greater chance of being audited.
Not sure how we would prove or disprove that either. I do frequently explain to lawyers when I call them to schedule the audit and they voice their concern that they were recently audited or they were audited last time or they were audited every time the district was selected. I do try to give the explanation that I just gave you all of how their name could come up more often than not. In smaller districts, well, I say smaller districts. So if you have the 2 districts and they're comparable in size, I'm going to conduct comparable amounts of audits in each of those districts. So I'll be auditing a good portion of them, both districts. But if you have a smaller district that is selected with a larger district, then of course the smaller district, I'm going to do less audit. So it also depends on what districts are audited at the times those lawyers come up for audit.
Who you're paired with.
Right, right.
And Alice, do we have a list by lawyer of how many times they're audited, not by district?
I don't think we do. And do you
No.
know that? No.
I might be able to pull something together. I'll look after the meeting to see if we can't get something from our database, at least historically.
Yeah.
And could I ask a question? You indicated that a lawyer in the same firm is not subjected to an audit because other lawyers in the firm have been audited within 3 years. So the way I understand that, if you're practicing with Parker and Poe, about an 800-man firm, and one lawyer gets audited, then nobody in that firm has to worry about an audit for 3 years?
Correct. If the firm has one trust account, some big firms have trust accounts for different locations.
So it's based on a number of trust accounts, not really. If Parker Poe has 20 different trust accounts, then that rule would apply just to the lawyers using each of those trust accounts. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
So when you go to a location in the district, you're going to audit all the trust accounts in that office.
Correct. Correct.
And it won't matter if there's like a real estate trust account that only 2 lawyers in the firm use. And the lawyers,
Correct.
and the lawyers whose name you picked is not one of those lawyers, you're still going to look at those real estate trust accounts.
Yes, yes. When a lawyer is selected for audit, it subjects the firm's trust accounts. And the lawyer selected does not have to be a partner, shareholder, signatory on the trust account.
The second question is if a law firm has offices in Charlotte and in Salisbury and in Durham, when you go to audit the lawyer who's located in Charlotte, do you look at those trust accounts that are associated with the other satellite offices of that firm?
I do not. I do not.
Any other questions about selection?
I do. And you had several charts that you produced and I forwarded them to the subcommittee members.
Yes,
Are those things that I thought they related to this question, and I don't know if you would like to
Yes.
explain those at this time.
Yes.
I can screen share them, or Peter, can you screen share?
if you'll open up the audit recap, if you can screen share that one.
We'll see.
Okay.
The
Let me pull
audit recap. All right, you tell me if I'm showing the right thing. Is this what you wanted?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and can everybody see it? You need me to move it on my screen anywhere? Does that work?
We can see some of, yeah, we can see some of it. I think it'll, for the purposes of Ann talking about it, yeah, we're good.
I think, yeah,
I can shift it over to like this as you talk, Ann. Okay,
Yeah.
so just
Okay.
tell me when you want me to move it over.
Okay.
She's telling us generally, sort of.
okay. So this is a good example of the impact on the size of the districts when they're selected for audit, of how many audits are going to be conducted. So if you just look at the first quarter of 2013, where Rockingham, at that time, Judicial District 17A, and then Judicial District 21, Forsyth, were selected. So because of the size of Forsyth, or 21st Judicial District, I conducted most of the audits there. And then the lesser amount of audits I conducted in 17A. But then on the flip side, if you took 17A and they were chosen, let me see,
Should I move it?
with another small district, I would do more in 17A and probably equal to the other district.
And since you did us last time in December, I think it was us and then Eddie's district of Harnett and Lee. So I think you probably did as close to equal in Harnett and Lee as you did in Caswell versus 2013.
Correct, correct.
What does collectively mean there?
Collectively means the number of lawyers impacted by the audits. So if you look at 2020, there were 17 audits conducted in Judicial District 9. And in those 17 audits, 81 lawyers were affected. So there were some firms that were audited. So when the firms are audited, I count those lawyers as being part of one audit.
Right. Which is, Peter, I guess in a sense that makes, when I ask for the information about lawyers individually that have been audited, in a way, I don't know if you're going to have it, because Zan's
Correct.
saying, if one person in my firm is audited, everybody's audited.
That's right. I would only have the name of the person who's selected, most likely. I wouldn't have all of the secondary lawyers, tied to that firm.
Correct. Trying to see.
I'm not sure I understand. I want to make sure I understand. For instance, Cherokee County, you're saying that you audited 19 attorneys, but that affected 33 attorneys, right? Because there were other people in the firm? Okay.
Correct.
So when she gets her list and picks how many audits she's going to do, it's the first number you see there, I guess, the 19 in Cherokee. And at that point, you probably don't even necessarily know how many it's going to affect.
Correct.
And so, and the 33 then they're subject to the 3-year rule.
Correct. Correct.
Those 33 will not get audited for 3 years.
Correct. Correct.
And these statistics were for this past year.
They're for all the years since I was auditor.
At the top, if
Yeah.
it
the
was
top-
showing it a minute ago, well, I guess we went up a little bit each. There you go.
Yeah,
see.
2021,
See.
yeah. Right now it's showing the end, like last year going back, but the years at the very top.
So you can see why some people would sit there and say, well, if I'm in a Parker Poe, my chances of being audited are much less because someone in my firm will have been audited.
Correct.
But you also have the flip side of that, Barbara, is that if they are out of the 3-year term,
They-
then, you know, they have a very high chance of their trust accounts being audited because
Correct.
they, you know, it's really if anybody in their firm gets picked. So,
Yep.
Right.
but you see the Mecklenburg number there where there were only 27 audits in 2021 in Mecklenburg, but it affected over 1,000 lawyers because of the big
Mhm.
The fact is, in large firms, probably hardly anybody knows about it.
That's right.
Mhm.
And in a smaller firm, you do. So you kind of feel it more. You're
Right.
the one that's sitting there.
I had a follow-up question on that, which is, Anne, when you, at the end of the audit, where you have a review of what you found, what in the larger firms, who is typically there? Is it just the managing partner and the staff that does the actual day-to-day handling of the account? I mean, do you end up having more than just 1 or 2 lawyers present when it's one of the larger firms?
I would say on average, it's mainly the managing partner, and any staff, staff that have trust account responsibilities. But most of the time, if the managing partner is really well versed in the trust account, I would just meet with that person. I have met with several members of a law firm for the review. It really, I think, depends on their schedules. You know, who, if the managing partner is going to be available, or a secondary partner or someone like that's going to be available. Sometimes the larger firms want the attorney selected for audit, regardless of whether they have trust account authority, since they're the one that was selected to sit in on the audit. Just, I guess, to help share the pain. I'm not sure. But I prefer that if the lawyer selected is not familiar with the trust account, I prefer, and I tell them this, I would want to meet with a lawyer that is responsible or more familiar. And then again, of course, I like to have the staff present as well.
And I was going to say, Alice, when Anne came and did ours, I think at one point it was me, then another time it was someone else in our office. It really has nothing to do with the trust account. And I asked her if I could be the one to meet with her, because I'm the one that, you know, it would have been meaningless for that other person
Right.
to sit in there. They
Correct.
would have known nothing. So
And do you have an idea as to how many firms are exempted from audits by providing to you all an audit from an accounting firm?
I don't have an exact number right now, Eddie, but I can tell you it's less than a couple dozen. I feel confident it's less than a couple dozen.
That's about right, Anne, because I think we send you on a best case 10, and
Yeah.
it's very small.
It is very small.
any other questions about this part of the process? And we will definitely, you know, come back in and discuss this again, but this is just to sort of get an idea of how it's currently done. All right. Then let's go on to kind of what you find during these audits. And again, reminding everybody that these are procedural audits.
Yes.
I should have had you send a copy of your checklist, but since everybody here's been audited, maybe they remember what it looks like.
So as it's a procedural audit, I don't generally do an in-depth accounting review. However, I do randomly select 2 clients that have had activity and audit the attorney's records for those 2 clients just to show or just to verify that I can follow their audit trail. Other than that, I look at their records for any deficiencies, really. I mean, of course, when I look at their records, I'm looking to see if they're in compliance and then if there are any deficiencies. Most of the deficiencies I find have remained the same year after year after year as far as being the top deficiencies. Some quarters I find more. Just for example, monthly reconciliations not completed or balances do not agree. That's typically the one of the top deficiencies. And one quarter to the next, I will find a handful. Some I might find more than, and just by the nature of the audits being completed for solo or small law firms, because that is the majority of the practices in the state, it's found more with those small and solo law firms. Most of your larger law firms do have better processes and procedures established, and they have more staff. So they tend to be in compliance with most of the major deficiencies. And things that I find at a larger law firm are usually the lesser or less serious deficiencies. What I find, I'm not sure how many are on the ethics committee or have been on the ethics committee, but I did list, and I don't know if you had a chance to read it, the top deficiencies I found: monthly reconciliations, quarterly reconciliations. Those are 2 serious deficiencies. And then your reconciliation reports not signed and dated by attorney, your quarterly random transaction reviews not completed by attorneys. Those 2 items were new requirements that came into effect when the rules were revised in 2016. And it concerns me that there's still some of the top deficiencies that I find 7 years later. And then the others are typical of every audit. So it's not really more focused or found more in small versus large firms.
Ann, do you have any help in your office? Do you have any assistants?
No. I have an administrative assistant that prepares the audit packets, and that's all. The rest is me.
How do you think, well, do you see a need possibly for a liaison person, another accountant, to be available to assist lawyers in setting up their trust accounts and in maintaining their trust accounts?
I think that is something we have discussed that I do believe would benefit the lawyers in the state by way of maybe a trust account management program. But I think that's going to be something we hopefully will look into later in the committee's agendas. But I certainly think our outreach could be ramped up.
I mean, to me, that's going to help attorneys, and it's also going to help the public.
Yes, yes.
Good point, Celine. So Anne, after you finish the audit, what happens to your report?
Okay, so once I review the records, complete the audit report, review it with the attorney, if there's no deficiencies or scale of deficiencies that need to be followed up on, it's done, it's completed. If they have deficiencies that they are more serious or they don't do as good a job of, I prepare the corrections request form. It's another set of documents. I review that with everyone present during the audit review. All the documents for the audit are passed on, not all the documents. The audit report and the corrections request forms are filed with Leonore, and she is tasked with following up on the corrections.
All right. Leonore, do we want to turn it over to you now, or?
Barbara, I do have the audit checklist. I pull it up from the trust account handbook that I can share if you'd like Ann just to.
Yeah,
read
let's
it.
just look at it real quick.
Okay.
That's actually not my checklist, but
Oh, it's not?
no, but it is something I do provide. I'm sorry, I do provide a guide sheet to all lawyers, and it references the pertinent points in the trust account handbook that they can read regarding the random audit. And then it lists the documents they should have ready for me at the time of the audit. And that goes into the specific types of documents I need to see.
All right. So do you want me, can you see the list? This is from the trust account
Yes.
handbook.
Yeah.
And it's really tied into the rules themselves.
Yes.
So the definitions, there are questions related to that. But understanding in that this is not what you would normally be using, right?
Yeah, it is what I used or what was used to develop the audit report. So it is still a good checklist for the attorneys to look at it in a little bit more detail, but it doesn't help them pull together the records I need.
And just looking at it right there, you know, and we'll get into all this in more detail, but I think so many people don't understand why you want oversized checks, and it's getting harder and harder, you know. Again, talking about technology, it's getting harder to get checks returned to you. It's getting harder to get them to give you a copy of the back of the check, and then these larger checks. Very interesting.
Okay, I'll stop screen sharing.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions at this point for Anne? All right, Leonore?
Yeah, Alice, do I have the ability to share my screen? You can do it one of two ways. You can either enable screen sharing or make me co-host.
Leonore, you're a co-host, so you can screen share now.
Okay. Okay. My segment is going to be a lot shorter because Anne does the heavy lifting in the random audit process, and we take on the back end what Anne provides. But I do want to take a minute. I said I'd tell you a little bit more about what I have to do with trust accounts when I got to talk with you about random audit follow-up. And as trust account compliance counsel, I actually do or oversee all of the things that you see on the screen in front of you. So pretty much anything that has to do with trust accounts, I'm involved with it. I don't have on here, but also overseeing the follow-up for our state suspensions. And as deputy counsel, before I assumed the role of trust account compliance counsel, had a lot of experience with trust accounts in connection with investigating the allegations of misconduct related to trust accounts, and also in prosecuting lawyers for violations of mainly the 115-2K don't use other people's money for anyone's benefit other than the client. And it's that background that informs a lot of what I do in all of what's on the screen in front of you, including the random audit corrections and trust account compliance. You can see hopefully a little arrow from random audit corrections to trust account compliance program. When I first started as deputy counsel here, a lot of the folks who would come to grievance from random audit corrections, the only place that there was for them if monitoring was something that would be helpful in terms of protection of the public was through the disciplinary process all the way through to a state suspension. And that's no longer the way that it works. A lot of those lawyers now end up in the trust account compliance program. And I happen to think that that's a pretty good thing. So the reason that there is a random audit correction is really set out in subsection B of the random audit rule. A lot of folks don't know that Anne is the only person who can note a deficiency in attorney's trust account management and give them an opportunity to correct it without reporting their misconduct to the grievance committee. And so that's how we get to the random audit corrections process. I only know a very little about how the process has changed through time. And it's really two major differences. Before Peter assumed the role of trust account compliance counsel, the auditor both did all the things that Anne said and also was responsible for the follow-up for the deficiencies that were noted. So Bruno handled all of that. What he told the attorneys to correct, they had to demonstrate to him that they had corrected it. And it was to his satisfaction. And if not, then they were referred for grievance discipline. Now, as Anne said, that all comes through me. And there's a paralegal in our office, Jeff Lundgren, who works with me in this process and really helps to keep it moving. And now there's sort of two paths that a lawyer who is unsuccessful in correction of the random audit issues goes. They're either going to be routed through grievance for discipline or routed through grievance for the trust account compliance program.
Leonore, can you make that decision, or does that have to be made by a grievance subcommittee?
The grievance subcommittee is who determines what happens to the file once it goes through the grievance process. I've put another slide up, and this slide, step 3, really tells you the decisions that I'm making. Right. I'm either making a decision that the random audit correction should be closed as satisfied, that there's a follow-up submission required, there's something else either that the lawyer needs to send, or that what they sent was deficient or revealed other things that they now need to demonstrate correction of, or either they demonstrate an inability to correct it, or it's just been too long trying to get them up to speed, then I'll close it by referral to the grievance committee. And in that case, then the grievance will take it from there the way that they ordinarily would with any other grievance file that we might have.
Okay.
And that pretty much sums up what happens in the random audit correction process. I am primarily reviewing for compliance. Did they correct? And I don't re-review what Anne did. So I do see everything she noted as a deficiency. I try really hard to take my prosecuting attorney hat off and not spend a lot of time in that space. And I look at what Anne says needed to be corrected because she's the person who was on the ground with the lawyer and really saw what their practices were and has a feel for what needs to be addressed and corrected. However, sometimes in the correction process, the lawyer either sends something that Anne didn't ask for or sends something that reveals something else. And then I still will follow up and note that and ask them to correct that deficiency. I mostly look at the overall results of the audit in connection with the corrections if I'm really struggling about what to do with a lawyer in terms of the number of times that I've had to follow up with the lawyer in an effort for them to show that they've corrected the issue. It has pained me at times. I will follow up with a lawyer as many as 4 times who will not send the correct check sizes because I mean, my letter changes for that lawyer because it's almost a pleading. Would you please just send to me the correction of this? This is not a reason to get referred to grievance, but that is, the options are closed as satisfied, followed up, or referral to grievance. And that about sums up what the correction process looks like. We keep anecdotal numbers. They've not been reconciled with Ann's, but it probably would be a good thing for us to do. I've asked Jeff to sort of keep them. He reviews all of the audit reports and keeps numbers. And we're hovering at about somewhere around 60% on average of lawyers who have to demonstrate some sort of correction of the deficiencies that Ann noted. And that doesn't include, I mean, Ann, you can speak more to this than I could, but I know from the reports I received from Ann, she sort of gives some opportunity for correction on site as well. And so the numbers that I see on in-office correction don't include lawyers who've received some tutoring, is what I'll call it, from Ann on site and have been able to demonstrate to her satisfaction that they've corrected that issue and will comply going forward with the correcting the deficiency that she's noted.
Well, I'm gonna ask you anecdotally, both of you, what do you think? I mean, most lawyers, they don't want to get in trouble. 60% though is a huge number. What's going on? They don't, to Zealand's point, do they really just don't understand how to set it up? It's lack of resources, laziness. I mean, it's
All of the
rarely
above.
dishonesty. Yeah.
It's all of the above.
And
Go ahead.
And there's also the other one, and I don't know if you see this, I do through the trust account compliance program. I bet you do too, though, Ann. Some of it's just abject fear of the process. And therefore, there's a sort of avoidance that comes with it because it seems too big and too scary for the lawyer. And the trust account compliance program is helpful because we sort of do a little counseling. And I bet you do too, when you sit down with them, counseling of the lawyers, sort of cheering them along. Well, you can do this. Here's how you do it. Here are some strategies for doing it, things like that.
Yes. And I think sometimes they do feel overwhelmed. And then it leads to them making things more complicated than it needs to be, which there again takes time, and time is very rare. Spare time or trust account time is not their top priority. However, when I put my serious face on, I do tell them it's something you do have to make time for. Solo practitioners, small law offices struggle more just because their resources for staffing alone, but they're running a business as well. I guess I just try to counsel them on how they can fit some of these things in where it's an easier process. Duplicate deposit slips versus counter deposit slips will save time, will keep them more in compliance because they will have to write on the duplicate deposit slip. They have their record already. They use a counter deposit slip. They're writing things twice. If you have to write something twice, you're likely not to write it twice. You're likely just to write it the one time. So it's some things I think can be simplified for them. Other things are just, being strict with them to find time to devote to the trust account. It can be more time if they're not good, if they don't have good procedures in place. It can be less time if they have good procedures in place.
So we're gonna, try to respect our time today, which was an hour, I believe. And, of course, we knew we weren't gonna solve all the issues, even identify them, but I think this has been very helpful. And what I want to ask the committee to do is to, be thinking about what questions have been raised in your mind about this. What are areas that we should look on and focus on further? Where might we improve? What should we talk about? And you can send that to me and copy Alice to be considered for as we move forward. I think we sort of have an idea about our next meeting. Allison, I don't know, was this where we were going to try and look at, or have you had the opportunity to look at what other states do? That's often very informative for us. So,
Barbara, can I ask a really quick question? Because I'm afraid I'll forget it. The six, when you pick the 6 districts, and you look at the districts that have been audited the most recent, when you're trying to choose the 2, do you treat Wake County and Mecklenburg the same as you do all the other districts?
Yes. Yes.
A quick question. What is the time frame within which the attorneys have to comply with what you suggest, Anne, and then it goes on to Leonora, and then Leonora, how long before you send it to grievance, please?
So
Most of the time is within 30 days. If I believe that the attorney may need more time, I will give them more time. Primary example is your cancel check images. Sometimes it'll take a bank a statement cycle or 2 to correct their images. So I usually give the attorneys at least 60 days to submit their corrections. And then from there, it's Leonore's timeframe.
yeah, I was gonna say, every correction request we see from Ann is either 30 days, less frequently 40, and most infrequent would be 60. And once it comes to us, I don't have a set time frame for referral to grievance. Sometimes it depends on what the deficiency is. Lawyers who have 0 reconciliations, I pretty much give them the 30 days, but that's really not a procedural deficiency, it's a substantive one. And so those files are going to be referred to grievance so that can be investigated. As I just said, a lawyer who doesn't have the correct check sizes, because it is such a minor deficiency, and I just can't wrap my mind around that lawyer being referred for a grievance, which is the only option if they don't satisfy it. That lawyer gets a lot of follow-up, pretty much with a pleading letter from me at the end saying, would you please just send this? Because if you don't, grievance referral is at issue. And then you've got everything in between. So if there's a lawyer who's tagged for a deficiency of failing to a sheet, there's only so long I'm going to give that, because I know generally what can be at issue with a lawyer that's failing to tend to that sort of deficiency. That may be 1 or 2 follow-ups. So my timeline is really driven by the number of follow-ups that a lawyer might receive. And the more serious the original deficiency, the fewer follow-ups that lawyer is going to be afforded. Like I said, 0 reconciliations, no follow-ups. And sometimes a referral regardless of what you send initially. Canceled checks, failure to maintain those sizes, way more follow-ups. And then there's everything in between.
Barbara, if I could interject just real brief, something I would like to see maybe this committee look at. By no means am I suggesting we alter the current CLE rules that are being proposed. Peter would kill me. But something I would like to see, we've heard Zealand mention some help with this. I was surprised to learn in my random audit, you had to present to Ann, did you take the trust account compliance course? Mine was done in 2016. There is no requirement that we have to go through it again.
Correct.
I would not be bothered. I don't like requiring certain things in CLE, but I would not be bothered by seeing once every 3 years, if you're a signatory on a trust account, to have that as a required CLE. It also would possibly help with some of the diversion things that the grievance committee is looking at if we have more of those courses available. Just doing a quick look on the Bar Association website, there are only 8 courses that I quickly just plugging in trust account that are available, and 3 of them are the old 2016 models. So maybe that's something we would look at down the road. Again, I want it on the YouTube so Peter doesn't kill me. I am not proposing changing the current rendition as proposed, maybe down the road.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure this would be a CLE rule. It might be through the trust account rule, as is the current requirement. It's
Mhm.
funny you said that, Matt, because I had in my mind that you had to do it every 2 years. And that's what I've been telling my staff and all our attorneys. Every 2 years, if you sign checks, every 2 years. And then I went back to look and find it. And I'm like, it's not in there anywhere.
I was the same way, and it was not until Ann came out, you have to present that certificate, and I'm like, this thing's 6 years old.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. No, good point. Good point. And maybe we can leverage some of our other groups too. I saw something the other day, Lawyers Mutual sent out something and said, if you have your insurance through them, you're entitled to a free consultation with one of their tech folks to talk about, technology issues and all kinds of stuff. And they'd certainly be interested in this. Maybe rather than us hiring somebody, maybe they'd hire somebody and kind of offer free consultations. It would be money well spent for them, I think. So
You're taking my retirement gig.
yeah, there you go. There you go. Do it
You
for
can't
fun.
retire. Yeah, I told you that already.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, so Alice, roughly our plan for our next meeting.
Well, given a number of factors, Barbara, I've been encouraging all of the subcommittees of issues, and there are 3 now that are actively engaged, to hold their second meeting after the April meeting. But if we get organized, there's a possibility we could hold 2 meetings in between the April and July quarterly meeting. What I'll do is circulate some kind of poll or inquiry for people about their availability during that time frame, so we can get it on everybody's calendar. We were slow in doing that this time, and it made it much harder for us to find a convenient date for folks. So that's what I was thinking. If that's okay with you, then we'll get that started, and so people will have it on their calendars. But it'll be after the April meeting.
Right. And I think then again, is in terms of what we're going to talk about at that meeting, we're still, I believe these very first meetings, we're going to be just collecting information before we dive into trying to overhaul our program or decide if it need to. So I want you to all just be thinking about what you've learned today. And the next meeting is likely to be, again, presentation of information. And then from there, we'll kind of decide where we go. So anybody here have a undergrad degree in statistics?
I know.
Very helpful to be able to figure out all of this.
Barbara, just to let you know, we actually have a statistician that works with a specialization program.
Right.
And I asked someone in the specialization program to ask him if he could recommend somebody to do some kind of statistical analysis, because I think that is one of the questions that comes up, is like, it seems like the way the program is set up now, it doesn't take into consideration that we've got now some districts that have very large numbers of lawyers. And this statistician said he would love to do it. So, and I have his resume. Actually, I'll forward it to you, Barbara. So if that's something that the subcommittee would like to do, to get an analysis of how it affects, the way we do it now, and a recommendation as to how it might be changed. We have somebody on board who's willing to do that for us. He does charge for services, but he charges very little to the specialization program because he finds it interesting. So I suspect we could take advantage of that also with regard to any work of this nature.
I don't know what the rest of you think. I think that'd be a wonderful idea. We can all sit here and try to draw our conclusions, but we've got the math. And
Yeah, I think that would be great. So I'm I can't quite figure it out. It doesn't seem right. Maybe that Wake and Mecklenburg are treated the same as these other small districts when you're pairing it, when they show up in the group of 6 every. I mean, that just doesn't seem right. I mean, I'm not a math person. It's just the smell test. For me, it's just doesn't seem right.
And, Marcy, whether it turns out that it's perfectly fine or not, at least
Right.
it would be nice to be able to say to folks,
Yeah.
we actually looked at this and we had a statistician look at it and,
Well, like everything else, Barbara, as well as I do, communication.
yes.
We've gotten better, I think, over the years as a state bar of communicating to folks. And I think that's, once this is done, it's important how it's communicated, everything that was done. So I think this is a great committee.
I appreciate everybody's time. Feel free to email us if you've got some thoughts that you want to put in front of us before the next committee meeting. And Alice or Peter, if you'll let Julie and David Allen know that, where they can hopefully watch this to kind of catch up on what they missed, that would be great.
Will
Eddie,
do.
I'm so glad you were here. I thought you weren't going to be able to attend, so it's a little bonus for us.
We will do that, Barbara.
Any other business to come before the committee? All right. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.